I would like to welcome you all to our second town hall to discuss the development of the environmental justice in the permitting process guidance document. Thank you all for attending this event. My name is Victoria de las Casas, and I serve as the Director of Cross Media Programs here at DEQ in the central office. I joined DEQ this May, and for the last couple of months, I have been heavily focused on the implementation of House Bill 1266 and the environmental justice issues. We will discuss in detail what House Bill 1266 is, or right now it's a law, it's Chapter 461 of the Virginia Code. And in a nutshell, it requires DEQ to update its existing draft of environmental justice in the permitting process document and to consider in this guidance two concepts. One, the concept of cumulative impacts and how to assess them. And two, the concept of outreach strategies, how to engage potentially impacted communities. Let me say a couple of words about the agenda for today and the format of the meeting. First of all, during the last town hall on Wednesday in Richmond, we heard your suggestions and requests to provide a virtual option for this town hall. And so we are providing a live stream option for this meeting. And I believe we have over 80 people registered to attend this meeting. This town hall will also be recorded. And for those of you who join us virtually today, you are welcome to submit your suggestion to the dedicated email address, oegejcomments@virginiadq.gov, and we'll put it on the screen later today. We are also considering and are hoping to send an invitation very soon to hold a separate town hall in a webinar format. And again, we are hoping to set it up for next week, August 6th. So stay tuned for that invitation. Regarding today's agenda, first of all, we prepared a presentation for you, and we hope that presentation will be helpful to explain the basics of environmental justice law in Virginia. We would like to take the bulk of today's time to hear your ideas and your suggestions on how DEQ should draft an environmental justice guidance document. As part of our presentation, we will preview some key concepts and ideas that we are considering to include in the guidance. Again, those are just our ideas and concepts, but we are looking for your suggestions on those ideas and any additional suggestions that you have. We heard many great suggestions during the town hall last week in Richmond, and we are already working to implement those suggestions and think how to address them in our draft guidance document. I wanted to introduce several DEQ staff who are here to support this important event. We have, I believe, at least 12 DEQ staff members. And let me start with everyone who is on this table today. First of all, we have Jonathan Rack, who is the DEQ Deputy Director here in the central office. We also have 3 members of our EJ staff. Daniel Sims, who is EJ Program Manager, also located in central office. We have Gwen McCrae, who is Public Participation Coordinator, and she's in the Northern Regional Office. And we have Kate Miller, who is Public Outreach Coordinator, and she's in our Blue Ridge Regional Office. Also, yesterday, actually on Monday, a dedicated Office of Environmental Justice intern started in the central office. Her name is Layla Dawson, and she's attending us virtually. I also wanted to say thank you to Craig Nickel, who is the Tidewater Regional Office Director, and thank you for offering your space for this event. And we also have Jerome Brooks, who attended the town hall in Richmond, who is our Piedmont Regional Office Director. And I also wanted to acknowledge several of the staff members who are here in the room. They are running outside, but are also helping with this event. We have Kate Collette, we have Janet Wayland, we have Julie LaFeria, Rob Monroe, Stephanie Arnold, Kevin Wan, and Lisa Hardy. And I believe several of them are also on the line helping with the virtual portion of this event. Thank you all for your time. I will turn it to Craig right now to say a few words about the logistics of this event, and then to Gwen, who will be our facilitator for tonight.
Thank you.
So I speak loud enough, but I'll just stand a little closer to the mic. So I want to welcome you to the Tidewater Regional Office. Please don't feel that you can't come here for other reasons other than Town Hall. We're always here to help you and walk through any issues you might have or concerns with the community and environmental issues here in the Tidewater area. But the reason I'm up here right now, just besides saying thank you, is I really just kind of want to do a quick safety brief, just in case there is something that would happen unintentionally this evening. You came in this back corner at the front door. If we can, we would egress out that front door again. If that door is blocked for some odd reason, we would go out this back door over here. I would ask you to follow DEQ staff, and we would go straight out the back of the building to the back parking lot, and that can ensure you a safe egress from the building if we need it. Also, if you have not visited the facilities yet, out that door to your right or around this corner to your left, right behind this wall are the bathroom facilities you need. If you need beverages other than the water and food that are in the back of the room, there's also a water fountain out here. So please enjoy yourselves tonight as best you can while we're talking about such delicate issues and things that we're trying to move forward. So thank you to Tidewater. And if you need anything, just ask a DEQ staffer and we will help you out. Thank you. Gwen?
All right, thank you very much. I'm just going to give a brief overview of a little bit more about what we'll be doing this evening. As Victoria mentioned, we will begin with a presentation where we will be discussing some of the concepts under consideration, as well as just an overview of environmental justice in Virginia. At that point, we will be then opening the floor for your suggestions, and that is what we will spend the bulk of this evening doing. We are here to listen and here to take your input, and we are really looking forward to that process. I want to mention that there is a court reporter here. The court reporter is here so that we can have a complete record of your suggestions and so that we can make sure that we don't miss anything that you are providing for us this evening. A transcript of that, of what the court reporter takes down, will be posted on our webpage. And although we are not in a public comment period, we are very much looking forward to receiving your suggestions about how DEQ should approach environmental justice in permitting. As Victoria mentioned, we are also live streaming this event via GoToWebcast. We are recording as well, and the video will be posted to our webpage. For those of you who are in the room, just be aware that there are microphones in the ceiling that pick up the sound in the room. So just be aware that it may pick up side conversations. So if you need to have a side conversation, you may prefer to go out to the hallway. For those who are online, there are live captions available. So the GoToWebcast has controls to turn on live captioning if you would like to do that. And as Victoria mentioned, people who are viewing online may submit suggestions to ejcomments@deq.virginia.gov. And I have put that into the chat on the live stream, so you should be able to find it there. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Danielle to begin our presentation.
Thanks, Gwen. To get us started, I will discuss Virginia environmental justice legislation, what a guidance document is and its process, Virginia EJ Screen Plus updates, and then we'll discuss key concepts in environmental justice in the permitting process, draft guidance, and then open the meeting for feedback. We have a QR code here that links to our fact sheet on the Virginia Environmental Justice Act and House Bill 1266 that may answer clarifying questions you may have. For this conversation, there are three main areas of legislation, which I'll cover in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. In 2020, the Virginia Environmental Justice Act became law. It established definitions such as environmental justice communities, low-income communities, communities of color, and meaningful involvement. Also in 2020, DEQ's policy statement was updated to include two purposes related to environmental justice. Lastly, this year, House Bill 1266 became law, which requires DEQ to publish an updated environmental justice in the permitting process guidance memo. The Virginia Environmental Justice Act defines environmental justice for state agencies. You can read the Virginia Environmental Justice Act via our QR code here, or you can find the information on your handout. The The Virginia Environmental Justice Act states that environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of every person, regardless of race, color, national origin, income, faith, disability, regarding the development, implementation, or enforcement of any environmental law, regulation, or policy. The law additionally defines fair treatment and meaningful involvement. And the next slides are a lot of text, so I will read them aloud. Fair treatment is defined as the equitable consideration of all people, whereby no group of people bears a disproportionate share of any negative environmental consequence resulting from an industrial, governmental, or commercial operation, program, or policy. Meaningful involvement is defined as the requirements that one, affected and vulnerable community residents have access and opportunities to participate in the full cycle of the decision-making process about a proposed activity that will affect their environment or health. And two, decision makers will seek out and consider such participation, allowing the views and perspectives of community residents to shape and influence the decision. It also defines what an environmental justice community is, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation. Lastly, the Virginia Environmental Justice Act states that it is the policy of the Commonwealth to promote environmental justice and ensure that it is carried out throughout the Commonwealth, with a focus on environmental justice communities and fence-line communities. Also in 2020, the DEQ policy statement was updated to include two purposes related to environmental justice. One purpose is to further environmental justice and enhance public participation in the regulatory and permitting processes. The other purpose is to ensure the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, faith, disability, or income, with respect to the administration of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. In 2023, DEQ drafted an environmental justice in the permitting process guidance memo that was not finalized. This year, House Bill 1266 became law, which requires DEQ to publish an updated environmental justice in the permitting process guidance memo that considers how to assess cumulative impacts of the type of permits covered in the guidance memo and outreach strategies to engage communities impacted by any such permit. House Bill 1266 also provides DEQ with a timeline to have 2 public town halls by July 31st, 2026. DEQ shall respond to public comments by October 31st, 2026, and the final guidance must be issued by December 31st, 2026. I mentioned the guidance memo in the previous slide and wanted to better describe what that is for people who may not be familiar. A guidance document is a document developed by DEQ staff to provide information to staff or the public on how to interpret or implement statutes or the agency's rules or regulations. These guidance documents are posted on the Virginia Regulatory Town Hall. The public engagement process for a document guidance includes an optional informal public comment period. Not all guidance documents are required to have this. And then in Virginia, the Administrative Process Act, or APA, sets out rules for when agencies must provide a public comment period before issuing certain types of documents. Guidance documents are required to have an APA 30-day public comment period. The purpose of the APA public comment period is to receive feedback on whether the guidance document is contrary to law or regulation or inappropriate as a guidance document. The public comment period must include public comment through the Virginia Regulatory Town Hall website after publication in the Virginia Register of Regulations and prior to its effective date. DEQ is considering opening an informal public comment period for the draft guidance memo as long as it fits within the timelines required by House Bill 1266. As I referenced earlier, the Virginia Environmental Justice Act also defines environmental justice communities, which is an important part of the draft environmental justice permitting guidance memo. Environmental justice community is defined as any low-income community or community of color. The law further defines low-income communities and communities of color. Low-income communities are defined in the Virginia Environmental Justice Act as any census block group in which 30% or more of the population is composed of people with low income. And then low income is defined and is determined based on having an annual household income at or below either an amount equal to 80% of the area median income where the household is located, as reported by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, or 200% of the federal poverty level, whichever is greater. Again, these definitions are from the Virginia Environmental Justice Act. Slide is also a lot of text, so I'll read it out loud. Communities of color is defined in two ways in the Virginia Environmental Justice Act. It is defined as any geographically distinct area where the population of color expressed as a percentage of the total population of such area is higher than the population of color in the Commonwealth expressed as a percentage of the total population of the Commonwealth. However, if the geographically distinct area where the community of color portion of the area is composed primarily of one of the following groups defined in the population of color definition: Black, African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, other non-white race, mixed race, Hispanic, Latino, or linguistically isolated. In these cases, the individual population of color as expressed as a percentage in that area exceeds the individual population of color as a percentage in the Commonwealth. For example, the statewide African American or Black percentage is 18.75%. So areas where the Black African American population percentage of the area exceeds that for populations of color. Again, these definitions are from the Virginia Environmental Justice Act. Switching gears here, Virginia EJ Screen Plus is DEQ's interactive online environmental justice mapping tool. DEQ originally developed the tool in 2022 to help users identify environmental justice communities as defined in the Virginia Environmental Justice Act. It shows both low-income communities and communities of color. It uses census block groups to define low-income communities as required by the Virginia Environmental Justice Act. For the communities of color, the Virginia Environmental Justice Act states that these communities are defined by geographically distinct area. So we chose to use census tracts to define communities of color. We chose census tract level data here because block group level data may have large margins of error. And this is consistent with other mapping tools such as Virginia Energy's disadvantaged community designations. Currently, according to Virginia EJ Screen Plus, 86% of the Virginia population and census block groups are depicted as an environmental justice community based on the definition of environmental justice community in the Virginia Environmental Justice Act. The draft 2023 guidance memo provided that 59% of the state's population and 53% of the geographic area were EJ communities. In 2025, the Virginia EJ Screen Plus tool underwent a few updates. The low-income communities data layer and communities of color data layer were both corrected to better align with the Virginia Environmental Justice Act definitions. And two, it was updated with more recent U.S. Census data from the American Community Survey. This year, we've added a new navigation panel, an EJ report feature tab, and an EJ summary pop-up box, and data layers. There's an EJ community census block group level layer that was added with details about each community's EJ status. There are also more available materials on our website, including fact sheets. There's a low-income communities technical fact sheet, a communities of color technical fact sheet, as well as an EJ communities technical fact sheet that describe the data terminologies and methodologies in more detail. We also have a user guide. If you're not familiar with Virginia EJ Screen Plus or GIS, you can start off by reading the user guide to help you get started using the tool and learning its features. Then similarly, we have online trainings. We have 4 videos on YouTube that are visual guides to help you, again, start using the tool and learn its features. Here is a screenshot of Virginia EJ Screen Plus with the new navigation panel on the left-hand side here, the very left corner. In that navigation panel and the information tab, we provide environmental justice definitions from the Virginia Environmental Justice Act when information is highlighted. It's highlighted in green on the left. And then next to that is an EJ report feature to the immediate right. You can click on this to run an EJ report. In previous versions of the tool, there were some challenges finding the EJ report options and finding environmental justice definitions. So we updated the tool so users can find that information more easily. From this view, if I were to click on the EJ report tab and then type an address here in the search bar and then drop a pin and click on that pin, it would look like this. So here I search the DEQ Tidewater Regional Office, where we are here. That's the yellow pin on the screen, you see. And then I clicked an area a little bit west southwest of that area, below Southern Boulevard and Arrowhead Drive. Then an EJ community summary pop-up box pops up that shows the details of which EJ community is demonstrated here. So it says EJ community yes, then it says EJ community status, both. So it's both an EJ low income community and a community of color. As well, below that, there is the percentage of people of color, low income, percentage of percentage of people of color, and then percentage primarily of a population. The census block group where I dropped the pin is highlighted this tealish green. And then looking around the census blocks in the census block groups in the area, you'll see that the other communities of color are colored blue. So right above that is colored blue. And then the low income communities are colored red. So you can see a little bit south of us is colored red as well as the census block group westward. And then where both are present, those are colored green. So on the other side of the highway, that is green. And then now I'll turn it over to Victoria.
Thank you, Danielle. That's a very helpful presentation. All right. Again, I want to reiterate that the purpose of this town hall is to really hear from you and hear your suggestions. Can you hear? Is it better?
Not really.
Let's see if there's a technical fix for that, or if I need to start like this. It'll probably be not convenient. Is this better? Feel like you can hear it maybe? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. So the purpose of this town hall is to really hear your suggestions and your ideas regarding what should be included in the environmental justice and the permitting process guidance. We at DECU have been busy thinking about how to approach revising this guidance. And so here we are going to present some of the same concepts that we discussed last week, but we did receive a lot of feedback last week. That was a very helpful feedback, and we are already reviewing this concept in light of that feedback that we received. So we believe that the 2023 draft guidance can serve as a good model for the revised guidance, but we also think that some updates may be needed. So I would like to discuss the aspects of the 2023 guidance that at this point we are thinking to include, which aspects we are thinking to change. And again, we are hoping to hear your feedback on all of those issues. So, and we'll talk about 4 or 5 concepts. So the first one is the project of concern concept. And you may recall it is very similar to the permits of concern concept that was included in the draft 2023 guidance. And so the significance of this projects of concern concept is that applicants for those type of permits will have to follow the guidance. If you're not applying for that type of permit, that you don't have to follow the guidance, so certainly you're welcome to do that. And so if you recall, the 2023 guidance included a list of permits of concern in 3 different media. There were air permits, and I put them on the screen. There were waste permits, also on the screen, and water permits. And so we are considering at this point to retain this list of permits with some minor tweaks. Again, we're open to your suggestions, but we would like to rename them to projects of concern, not permits of concern, because when you're applying for a permit, you don't get a permit. You're not guaranteed a permit. So again, we are looking for your suggestions on this list. Should any project types be added? Should some be removed? And again, we did appreciate the suggestions that you made last week. The next topic I would like to discuss is the environmental justice community assessment. And again, this was included in the draft 2023 guidance, and that guidance, that draft guidance document required that Office of Environmental Justice coordinators assess whether a project is located within an environmental justice community, and if so, conduct outreach to those communities. And so I did mention before that currently we have 3 full staff members. For this and other reasons, we believe that permit applicants may be better positioned to make this initial assessment and then conduct outreach to communities. Again, we're open to suggestions on this issue, but we are considering asking the permit applicants to do that initial assessment, again, using the Virginia EG-Screen Plus, which is our mapping tool that Danielle just talked about, supplemented by any other means that may be needed, for example, the door-to-door community assessments. And if the project is located in an environmental justice community as it's defined under VJA, provide meaningful involvement to those communities. And that brings me to a related topic of environmental justice focused community. You'll see it in the box on the right. If this is included in the draft guidance, this will be a new concept. And earlier in the presentation, Daniel mentioned that approximately 86% of population and census blocks in Virginia fit the definition of environmental justice community under the Virginia Environmental Justice Act. And so in our experience, some of the communities that fit that definition, that they may be very affluent communities with little to no environmental stressors. And there are other communities with much lower incomes and that are much more impacted by environmental stressors. And so we believe that those communities deserve more protections. And so for this reason, we are considering identifying additional criteria that will help us identify a smaller subset of those communities that may need further protection. And we are just, for the sake of this presentation, calling them environmental justice focused communities. And so the significance of this, including this concept, if we decide to, is that projects of concern in this focused communities will have to conduct not just the meaningful involvement, but also have to conduct cumulative impact assessment. And we'll talk about cumulative impact assessment. So again, we are looking for your suggestions on this approach. How can we identify those most affected communities? What criteria should we look for? We talked about the outreach strategies and meaningful involvement. And so we are considering providing detailed suggestions to permit applicants on how to conduct those outreach strategies. We are considering providing those suggestions on 3 separate levels: pre-application, so before an application is filed, after an application is filed, and after a permit decision, if any, was issued. And just a general topic is that outreach should be done early and use the methods that best fit the needs of the community. And so on the next screen, we are just putting some of this contemplated ideas that permit applicants can use to reach those communities. It could be community meetings, listening sessions, small group meetings, or even individual meetings. Could be webinars, videos, social media postings, creating a dedicated website for a project, sending information and updates through phone or text, emails, mailed notices, conducting surveys, posting signage, and really other ways of communication that would best fit the needs of those particular communities. And again, we are looking for your suggestions, your detailed ideas of what those outreach strategies could be. All right, and now I would like to talk about perhaps the most complicated concept, the concept of cumulative impact assessment. If you recall, that was one of the requirements, explicit requirements of House Bill 1266, that DEQ has to consider how to assess cumulative impacts in our draft guidance. And so we just want to start with recognizing that this is a very complicated concept. Virginia law, Environmental Justice Act, DEQ policy and statement do not provide a definition of cumulative impact. They do not provide us with any guidance on how to conduct cumulative impact assessment. So it is a complicated task and perhaps a multidisciplinary task. And so we've been working hard trying to come up with the concepts that could capture this cumulative impact assessment requirement. We looked at other states that have cumulative impact assessment requirements. And so one of the definitions for cumulative impacts that could be considered, it is on the screen, which is the effect on human health or the environment that results from the impact of a project of concern when added to the impacts of other environmental stresses in the area. I know that we received your suggestions last week, and some suggestions provided us with a alternative EPA definition for consideration. So thank you for those suggestions. And so one way to define environmental stressors is by this, perhaps you can call it a proxy concept of environmental stressor that you can see in the definition of cumulative impacts. Again, we looked at different states, and many of you may know that New Jersey has a very robust environmental justice law, regulations, and guidance. And that agency spent several years developing cumulative impact assessment concept. And so we believe that some of the concepts can be used from that model. Again, realizing that this is a very complicated topic, I will try to simplify how New Jersey model can be used here. Again, if we decide to consider this model. And again, we are looking for your suggestion. If this is a proper model, do you know of any others? What are the approaches and ways to consider cumulative impacts and how to conduct those assessments? So on the next slide, the first step under consideration would be for DEQ to identify environmental stressors that would be used in a cumulative impact assessment. And here on the screen, we provided just some of the examples of those stressors. I will just read them. They're ground level ozone, fine particulate matter, water outfalls, solid waste facilities, hazardous waste facilities. And you will notice that these stressors can be grouped into categories of air, water, and waste, and they correspond to the projects of concern categories.
Can I ask you a question? Are you taking feedback from us now, or we were to?
After I'm done with the presentation, absolutely, we are open to your feedback. Yep, thank you. Okay. So using DEQ's GIS capabilities, DEQ is able to calculate a stressor score for each census block group in Virginia. Once that score is done, there will be a comparison analysis. The stressor score in the census block group of the proposed project will be compared to the stressor score of a comparison non-environmental justice community. If, as a result shows that the stressor score in the community where the proposed project is located is higher than the stressor score of that comparison non-environmental justice community, then a permit applicant should conduct further assessment of their projects. And the purpose of this assessment would be to analyze the impact from the project on those environmental stressors. And again, the standard under the Virginia Environmental Justice Act that we work with is whether a community may experience a disproportionate share of negative environmental consequences. In addition, DEQ is also considering a concept of mitigation, which is used to reduce negative environmental consequences. And this concept is similar to the wetlands mitigation concept. It generally includes three components: to avoid, to minimize, and to compensate. And so one of the ways to mitigate negative environmental impacts is to avoid, which may include relocating a project if this is feasible. Then permit applicant would look at minimizing the impacts, and then compensating for any impacts. And again, we have received some great suggestions on the cumulative impact assessments, the definitions, and how to conduct them. And again, we are looking for your suggestion on any of these topics today. And I think that's a time to open the floor for suggestions. And I would just note that for those who are virtually attending this presentation, on the bottom here, you can see that we are accepting your suggestions, your ideas on the dedicated email, ejcomments@dq.virginia.gov. I will pass it on to Gwen, our facilitator.
Okay, very good. Give me a minute while we adjust our logistics here. If I can get some help to set up the microphone for the folks who will be speaking, that would be great. All right, while we are getting that set up, we are about to begin the suggestion portion of the evening. And I just want to reiterate that we really do appreciate your suggestions. We want to thank you so much for coming out this evening. We do want to hear from you. For the logistics of how we will be taking your suggestions, you may have, when you came into the building, picked up a speaker number. If you did not pick up a speaker number and you do want to speak, we have now placed them on the back table, so you are welcome to pick one up if you have not already. On that piece of paper, there is space for you to write your name. So we will be asking for your name and affiliation, if applicable, or the group that you're representing. We will call people up in order of the number on the speaker numbers, and Kate will be here to take those slips from you and to assist if there's any issues with the microphones or anything like that. If you, for any reason, cannot come up to the microphone and when it's your turn to speak, please raise your hand and we will be happy to hear you. Just as a reminder, there is a court reporter here who will be taking a complete record of your suggestions. We are live streaming and recording this event as well. As has been mentioned before, for those who are viewing online on the live stream, they may submit comments to an email at ejcomments@deq.virginia.gov. And so with that, I will go ahead and get us started with speaker number 1.
Hello. Hello, good evening. My name is Karen Camblin, and I serve as the current Environmental and Climate Justice Chair for NAACP Virginia State Conference. We have approximately 100 branches, youth councils, and college chapters with close to 10,000 members across the corners of the Commonwealth, from Northern Virginia to Central Virginia, Blue Ridge, Piedmont, Southwest, Tidewater, and Valley area. All regions contains branches with these types of concerns we're discussing here today. I also would like to say thank you for holding these town halls, and we look forward to participating in the upcoming virtual town hall and during the public comment period when it opens. My comments today will address both questions before us today concerning cumulative impacts and outreach. But before I do, I just want to set the setting here. The Virginia Environmental Justice Act of 2020, as Danielle discussed earlier, defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of every person, regardless of race, color, national origin, income, faith, or disability. Furthermore, we should not forget that in the Friends of Buckingham County versus the State Air Pollution Control Board, the Fourth Circuit held that environmental justice is not merely a box to be checked, and the board's failure, the Air Quality Board, to consider the disproportionate impact on these closest to the compressor station resulted in a flawed analysis. Union Hill taught us what happens when an agency reviews one permit in isolation. This guidance is Virginia's chance to write that lessons into actionable statewide policies. This is our opportunity to set a gold standard. In regards to cumulative impact, first, assess the total burden. Some of these things may be duplicative. I actually had to delete one of mine because mine was to develop a feedback loop where you give us a response to the comments you heard. So thank you very much for providing that feedback here today. But first, assess the total burden of a community already carries. New Jersey, as you mentioned, has a landmark 2020 law which defines cumulative impacts. And they have it as the combined past, present, and reasonably foreseeable emissions and discharges in a place. Virginia should adopt a similar standard where every existing permitted source, plus the environmental, public health, and socioeconomic stressors is in consideration, including legacy contamination, health disparities, flooding potentials, and extreme heat. Permits must evaluate the way people actually live in addition to existing conditions. In 2024, the Virginia Council on Environmental Justice annual report provided a comprehensive overview of the urgent need for cumulative impact considerations and provided relevant recommendations in areas such as policy gap, impacts in zoning and land use, technology, community engagement, and a few more. I highly recommend reviewing this chapter at a minimum, but the entire report is fantastic. And also present the document to the council when the draft document is made available for review. Second, require cumulative impact assessments for renewals, reissuances, expansions, and/or modifications, not only new applications. New York, New Jersey, and Minnesota, to name a couple, all require assessments when existing facilities seek renewal or expansion. The communities carrying the heaviest burden live next to facilities that already exist. We should protect them from further damage. Third, impose behavior change-in consequences, not merely a slap on the wrist. New Jersey requires denial of new facility permits that would add to a disproportionate burden, and it bars approval or renewal of any permit that adds an inequitable burden on disadvantaged communities. Any assessments, an assessment that changes nothing is a box checked. Also, the consideration of the cost to human health, property evaluations, and degradation of natural resources must be a part of the process. Fourth, defining the terms. The Environmental Justice Act speaks of increased health risk, disproportionate share, and negative environmental consequences, and quantifies none of them. This guidance is an opportunity to do so. Fifth, the assessment cannot end when the permit is issued. Fair cumulative impact review with air and water quality monitoring in overburdened and fence-like communities, and with stronger enforcement when facilities in those communities violate their permits. A community asked to absorb more risk deserves more vigilance. In regards to community engagement, we urge the EQ to ground its outreach strategy in the Jimenez Principles for Democratic Organizing and the Principles of Environmental Justice adopted at the 1991 First National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit. We must be inclusive and organized from the bottom up. Public notices must arrive early and in plain languages. Information should be distributed through channels people actually use. Today, in addition to the traditional methods, we can also consider having a more focus on who those stakeholders are and reaching out to that. So I always say a bigger table is always better. So reaching out to churches, civic organizations, youth programs, colleges and university student groups, having high activity centers, age-restricted communities, health centers, community bulletins, canvassing, radio, and all of the other social media stuff that we discussed today. This is an opportunity for us to identify innovative outlets. And also let people speak for themselves. Hold meetings in the affected areas. Communities in the evenings, on the weekends, provide various times, a variety of times, with virtual options, of course, and having a translation services, language, spoken, audio, as well as visual. And treat residents as experts. Their own lived experience and observations is just as important as technical reports in the decision-making process. There are a lot of community-based groups out there that know what they're doing, so we should be reaching out to them. And finally, engagement is the EQ's responsibility. And applicants' outreach can supplement, but should never substitute, the agency's own duty. In addition, carefully, and then this is just, there's already documented instances where a third-party evaluator values or misrepresents community voices. And it's very important for DEQ to serve as that bridge, that important bridge to make sure community voices are heard accurately and is valued and promoted and included as part of the decision-making process. Meaningful engagement means involvement that can change the result and help build long-term relationships. So in closing, the measure of this guidance is simple. Will the same communities, Black, Brown, Indigenous, low-resourced, and rural Virginians, will they be forced to continue to carry a disproportionate share of the Commonwealth solution or not? Oh, I forgot. And the Virginia NAACP stands ready to work with the EQ to make sure that we get this right and in time by December 31st. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaker number 2.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrea Wurtzel. I'm an attorney with Troutman Pepper Locke. And I would like to echo the first speaker's thanks to DEQ for holding these town halls and also for making the virtual option available. We really appreciate that. I'd like to offer some input based on my experience representing permittees. In my experience, permittees are supportive of environmental justice concepts, but want a clear understanding of the requirements and timelines associated with environmental justice reviews. This guidance is important because it will provide much needed clarity about how environmental justice will be incorporated into the environmental permitting process and the responsibilities of permit applicants as part of that process. The guidance, including the cumulative impact assessment and outreach provisions, should be consistent with DEQ's legal authority. DEQ does not have the authority to deny permits on the basis of the cumulative impact assessment under the Virginia Environmental Justice Act, or to require mitigation based solely on a cumulative impact assessment. It has to be grounded in the permitting authorities that are provided. The updated guidance should not be based on the original version of House Bill 1266, which was not enacted. Rather, the guidance must be based on the version of House Bill 1266 that was passed by the Virginia legislature and signed by the governor. And it directs DEQ to publish an updated version of the environmental justice and the permitting process guidance memo for public comment, including consideration for how to address the cumulative impacts of the types of permits covered in the guidance memo and the outreach strategies to engage communities impacted by any such permit. Cumulative impact is not defined in House Bill 1266 or elsewhere in the Virginia Code. However, both the State Water Control Law at Virginia Code Section 62.1-44.19:5 and the State Air Pollution Control Law at Virginia Code Section 10.1-1186.2:1 speak to cumulative impact considerations and provide specific context for making such assessments. There are also cumulative impact considerations specified in the air, water, and waste regulations. Here, if a new cumulative impact assessment will be required, additional context for what cumulative impact means, the purpose for conducting an impact assessment, and the criteria that impacts will be measured against is needed. It would also be helpful to understand how this new review relates to or incorporates any cumulative impact considerations already included in the Virginia Code and the various environmental permitting programs. This is particularly true given that 86% of Virginia is designated as an environmental justice community. That designation is based solely on demographics, income, and populations of color, and does not consider the presence of environmental stressors. For this reason, DEQ's idea of establishing EJ focus areas for purposes of determining the EJ communities that may already bear environmental burdens that vary significantly from the norm makes sense. And it is in these areas that cumulative impact assessments should be conducted to determine how additional impacts affect an already environmentally stressed area. Identifying EJ focus areas will also help make determinations with respect to disproportionate impacts. Providing greater clarity about how fence line communities are defined and factored into those EJ focus areas would be helpful. With respect to identifying EJ focus areas, has DEQ considered coordinating with local governments that adopt environmental justice strategies into their comprehensive plans? In those plans, localities are to establish baseline environmental and health conditions to characterize disproportionate conditions in fence line communities. So coordinating local plans with DEQ's guidance may be a helpful way to identify the EJ focus areas. The guidance should make clear that a cumulative impact assessment includes both positive and negative considerations. Positive considerations such as economic, quality of life benefits, job creation, tax base, ancillary support jobs, and community philanthropy should be considered as part of that assessment. It would also be helpful for the guidance to explain what is considered a negative environmental consequence, given that that term is not defined in the Environmental Justice Act. We understand that DEQ is proposing to apply the cumulative impact assessment to projects of concern rather than permits of concern. I think there's a general concern that that would impose a value judgment based on specific uses rather than focusing on the permit itself. More detail is needed to understand the purpose and intent of that language change. For example, would there be one cumulative impact assessment for a given project, regardless of the number of permits that are needed for the project? How is a project defined? Are there benefits to this approach, such as providing a more comprehensive analysis and streamlining the number of reviews or assessments required? This change may create more confusion than intended, what this language change is intended to convey, and how it applies in the context of a project that requires multiple environmental permits. If DEQ is considering a mitigation component to the guidance, it should be clear that mitigation requirements are proportional to the scope, scale, and impact of the permit. Additional details are needed regarding how mitigation will be calculated and how it would be applied in the context of different types of permits. There's also confusion about the purpose of the reference to post-permit outreach. More details are needed on the purpose of such outreach in order to provide meaningful input on that concept. DEQ's approach of focusing on permits of concern and excluding general permits, permits by rule, and permit renewals is reasonable and focuses attention on new major permitting actions. Many other states take that same approach. DEQ's permitting programs already provide for robust notification, outreach, and public participation. To the extent that DEQ is considering adding additional outreach requirements, they should be focused on those people who live within an area of the potential effects associated with the proposed project or permit. Again, here it might be useful to clarify how the fence line community concept fits within the meaningful outreach measures that are chosen. Thank you for your time and your consideration of these comments. I look forward to reviewing the draft guidance and to continuing to participate in the public comment opportunities. Thank you.
Very much. Speaker number 3.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Renee Jennings. I'm Outreach and Advocacy Coordinator for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We serve Hampton Roads and the Eastern Shore. PBF has submitted comments in 2023. My colleague was in Richmond as well. We feel it's incredibly important, clean air and clean water for all, stop. So we will continue to review and look forward to making more comments as they are adjusted. We believe the DEQ, the applicants, and certified professionals all play important roles. First, DEQ must provide guidance and enforce clear requirements for meaningful involvement of affected EJ communities in project development and community impact analysis in accordance with the Virginia Environmental Justice Act. Targeted outreach must be completed prior to the permit application submittal so the community is aware of the proposed project and can provide meaningful input early in the process. Cumulative impact analysis must include actual evaluation of disproportionate impacts with documentation of findings and mandates for remedies, including avoiding, minimizing impacts, modifying the project, or denying the permit. DEQ cannot abdicate its duty to set appropriate criteria and ensure procedural justice. DEQ must set and enforce the rules. Secondly, it's the applicant's responsibility to comply with the guidance and any remedies required to obtain a permit. This cannot be transferred to a third party. It should be the responsibility of certified professionals hired by the applicant to design and conduct appropriate outreach and complete a cumulative impact analysis suited to the project that meets DEQ guidance. Just like hiring a wetlands delineator, you hire a surveyist before you even begin the plans. These professionals with proper training must also complete this equally important work consistent with the rules. There are a couple other issues that we would like to address regarding the 2023 draft. So on the disproportionate impacts, DEQ's guidance must not limit its analysis to whether a project complies with the ambient air standards, because those compliance with these standards is already required by the Clean Air Act, and it is frankly inadequate for EJ areas. Disproportionate impacts cannot be assessed without establishing a baseline, such as community health assessment, to determine whether an EJ community faces increased health risk. DEQ's guidance should also define how increased health risk should be determined, as well as define terms like proximity and major sources of pollution. Next, DEQ should avoid placing strict or arbitrary restrictions on the set of permits that require EJ analysis. The EJ Act applies to any environmental law, regulation, and policy. The agency must not create arbitrary categories of permits that are not subject to analysis. General permits, as well as renewals, must be analyzed. I'm an outreach coordinator. I get it. It's really hard work. But something as important as this is extremely important, and we can and we should do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker number 4.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight here in Hampton Roads. My name is Michelle Olchi. I'm a resident and homeowner here in Virginia Beach. I'm also the Hampton Roads organizer for the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, a nonprofit based in the Mid-Atlantic focused on climate and environmental justice advocacy. I'm here today to request that the DEQ implements strong safeguards that address cumulative impacts in the permitting process for all facilities. The opportunity before us today in this drafting process has the potential to ensure that the guiding principles of environmental justice are adequately followed by Virginia DEQ to protect overburdened communities from greater harm as polluting facilities continue to prey on our neighborhoods. It is up to you all to make sure that that happens. When I began EJ work years ago, I quickly learned about the heavy environmental burdens that many communities bear for the comfort and profit of a few wealthy corporations in our country. In New York City, I toured neighborhoods full of polluting facilities ridden with asthma, obesity, child development issues, and mental health struggles, all for the profit of the billion-dollar industries. Now, in all the time I've spent involved in these fights in Virginia, I've seen that we here lack the necessary regulatory power to protect communities from becoming overburdened with pollution. One of these gaps is the inability of DEQ to consider cumulative impacts when administering permits to polluting facilities. When every company brags about the quote unquote low levels of pollution emitted by their facilities, but 100 facilities pop up in these overburdened communities, there's still a serious risk to residents posed by each new development, especially when existing health and social burdens are compounding the effects of this pollution. This pattern must stop, and permit decisions must consider the total burden rather than evaluating each source of pollution in isolation. Thus, tonight I'm asking that the guidance put forth by DEQ establishes a clear, transparent, and enforceable process for evaluating cumulative impacts for both new and renewal permits. This guidance should apply to the permitting of any facility likely to harm an overburdened community, not merely to certain categories of facilities. In particular, data centers and their associated backup generators or behind-the-meter gas turbines must require a cumulative impact assessment, as these facilities tend to clump together in large complexes that choke out entire communities. The cumulative impact assessment should also account for all existing pollution sources, hazardous sites, traffic, air, and water quality, health outcomes, and climate stressors, and all other relevant community conditions, including social and economic considerations. When a cumulative impact assessment shows that a community is already overburdened, permittees should be required to propose mitigation measures to minimize harm from the permitted activity to the greatest extent possible. If the harm cannot be adequately avoided or mitigated, DEQ should retain the authority to deny the permit to protect communities from the compounded pollution of adding another facility to a community. Overall, the guidance should make it clear that environmental justice is a core principle of Virginia DEQ's permitting process and ensures no community is asked to bear more than its fair share of environmental harm. This draft guidance has the ability to usher in a more fair and equitable permitting process for our communities, one that protects one single neighborhood from becoming a sacrifice zone for the rest of Virginia, whether that be Northern Virginia filling up with data centers that house over 7,000 backup diesel generators that can flip on whenever it gets too hot or too cold, or neighborhoods in Central Virginia like Chesterfield that battle decades of pollution from a coal power plant that finally shut down just for a gas power plant to take over in its place despite massive public opposition, or even communities right here down the road like Berkeley in Norfolk, surrounded by 6 of the 7 shipyards in the city. When the permits for each individual facility in these neighborhoods is evaluated on its own, without considering the reality that every resident in these communities faces every day, existing pollution, legacy pollution, and or social and economic factors, Virginians are robbed of a fair permitting process that truly protects our health and our environment. I urge you to right this wrong for us and implement a clear, transparent, and enforceable process for evaluating cumulative impacts for both new and renewal permits that holds the power to mandate mitigation plans or deny permits based on cumulative impacts and pollution burden for all Virginia communities. Thank you.
Speaker is speaker number 5.
Greg Singleton. Hi, my name is Greg Singleton. I'm a project manager for software development team. And so we use AI. And, you know, AI is why they're building all these data centers. You know, we use it, and I'm a great fan of what it can do, but I've never, ever come across a situation where I didn't have enough AI. And I'll bet none of you have either. The question is, in terms of what the last speaker said, in protecting our air, protecting our water, and protecting our communities where environmental justice has been inappropriate. Places that you can think of like Mississippi and Louisiana, where they went down there and built all those petrochemical places, and they now call the area Cancer Alley. Okay, so that was real bad environmental justice. That's what I think of when I think of environmental justice, is those areas where communities of color have been robbed of the areas, you know, the beautiful area where they settled in. They've been robbed of, you know, sound buffers. They've constantly got trucks running up and down the roads. The air quality is bad, and then their health is bad. And so when you start evaluating all of these environmental justice factors, I think you've got a good start. You're looking at particulate matter, you're looking at the water, and you're looking at hazardous treatment facilities. But there's a lot more that you need to look at. I'm sure all of you and the governor and all the members of the Virginia Legislative General Assembly all live in nice big houses with nice pretty grass yards and nice shrubbery, okay? And they're not going to have a data center built near them, okay? So we got to make sure that we take into account making sure that everybody has the same chance at a nice living area. So it's not just water quality, it's not just air quality, it's also sound quality. Who wants to have an 18-wheeler or a dump truck hauling a bulldozer driving up and down in front of your house every day? So that's sound quality. I think we should add that to it. I think that we need to add economic impact to the environmental justice communities. So when we start, when these data centers are being built, there's a requirement to build corresponding power plants, or not. We could require the power to come from sustainable sources. So that wouldn't be so much of an environmental justice issue. So we also got to think about how much, not only the particulate matter, the air and the water, but also people's paychecks. How much is this data center going to impact on the community's daily living standards for the economy? Do they have the money that it's going to take to pay all those extra energy bills? So there's a lot. I think you need to add a few more categories to the things that you're looking at. And when it really gets down to it, all these requirements that you have for assessing the areas for the cumulative impacts of environmental justice issues, I think you've got to take into account all of them together, but not just assessing them, but like a couple of the speakers have said already, enforcement. So I don't know the rules of whether DEQ has got teeth. I would think that it should. Once upon a time, the EPA had teeth. Lately, those teeth have been removed, and it's just a gum, toothless baby. But the DEQ should be, in my view, the body that evaluates whether something is allowed as far as environmental standards. And this environmental justice initiative is wonderful. But in the end, if you assess it and you aren't able to have an enforcement arm of it for either denying a permit, requiring the permit applicant to change the permit to build it in a different area, or then continually evaluating to see if the permittee who's been granted a permit is continuing to follow the rules, then it isn't effective. Thank you.
Speaker number 6.
Lisa Villa, Norfolk resident. Thank you. So just listening, I came up with a few suggestions regarding the cumulative impact assessment metrics. I wanted to reiterate looking at the health statistics, such as childhood asthma rates, cancer rates of the community in focus, and also which affects air quality and health is green space, tree cover, impervious area. That's a big factor that affects people. The other thing I would like to suggest is regarding the outreach is some metric to measure that it's been effective, like a survey of whether people have gotten the message. I used to work in some of that, and I think it's harder today to do outreach. So some way to confirm that people do know something's going on would be a good follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaker number 7.
evening. My name is Vince Hodges. I live in a fence line community, Norfolk, Virginia, Berkeley. Shout out to Michelle and Secan. I see some people here that were with my community last year when, if HB 1266 was in place, would have helped us with some advocacy for our community. It was facing a rezoning. We live in a community where, like was previously stated, there's a multitude of shipyards and a long history, over a century, of disempowerment. So when we say environmental injustice, you know, it's not just a catchphrase to get your attention. It really is how we live. I believe you said that. You know, this is how we live. So when we talk about things that the bill can do suggestively, noise was one thing that I noticed in here, and I went through and I looked, used AI, right? And to make sure quickly that noise was or was not addressed. And I thought it might be in the air, right? A part of an air permitting process. It's not. It's not. I live about a quarter mile from a pump station that is so loud that I can hear it at night at 2 in the morning. In the winter, when the wind blows off the Elizabeth River, it's loud enough, it squeals and keeps me up. You know, I don't live directly next to it, so I'm not somebody that's directly impacted. I do think that the 5-mile radius with these areas is something that's really good. The permitting process with the city of Norfolk really only had, for a rezoning issue last year, 300 yards. That wasn't near the cross-section equivalent of what could happen with this rezoning. So my suggestion is to put stronger language in for noise. Noise should be a strong consideration of this permitting process. Consideration of comments is really the main point of what I wanted to speak on. One shipyard, after a community confrontation, I'm just gonna call it what it is in plain language, they applied for a renewal of an air permit. All right. We did what we needed to do to rally the community, and we're hearing from other people that organizing is hard. It is much harder, especially in these environmentally depressed communities, to get people to care, because things have been this way. They are always going to be this way. We have to do double the work, especially when it comes to environmentalism. So we get all of our number in, all of our comments in, but we were told that there were duplicate comments, so the comments didn't meet the threshold, and that they used lay terminology instead of technical terminology. And when we're talking about communities in general, right? Like I work at a university here in a adaptation and resilience office, an engineering office. Consider myself, you know, pretty literate and articulate, but I don't have the technical language to speak on what this is. Somebody said earlier that the consideration of all comments with the ability to make the change is what meaningful impact looks like. So that is my suggestion. The feedback loop helps, so people can kind of like pick up the breadcrumb and then move an inch forward and move an inch forward. But the consideration of comments, technical versus lay terms. We talked about enforcement, or the gentleman before me talked about enforcement. That's a huge, when issues of cumulative impact, you can't considerable disadvantage. their recent comprehensive plan not only won an award last year, but just won another award for how great it is. Right? So it doesn't make any sense for industry or other applicants to be able to come in and citizens of that region, of a particular region, volunteer on their own time, come in and work to make sure that the vision for the next few years is applied to. I feel like permittees and applicants should have to show compliance with those plans. That's particular in, again, my neighborhood where we're starved of green space and third spaces in general. Yet that's been put on the back burner with a priority towards industry. Not fair, not equitable, not environmental justice. And I think that municipal planning commissions should have the authority to have some sort of rubber stamp on that. Like if a shipyard comes in and hasn't done that process and they can't show it with a check from DEQ, right, saying, yeah, you did. I feel like that shouldn't be there. We talked about community health risks. Suggestion also, and I'm sorry if I'm not preempting what's suggested, but these are suggestions. The community health risks, right? If a community engages and attempts to put forward a community benefit agreement, I suggest that DEQ give weight to that. Again, with populations not having strong nor the legal authority or
Speaker number 8.
Good evening. Oh, that's much better. Good evening. Kim Sutter with Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, and I also live in Berkeley, which is an environmental justice community. I did attend the town hall in Richmond, and I do want to thank you for your willingness to listen and for adding a virtual option. That was much needed. But I do want to talk about my community, mainly because I love it so much, but then also we need this type of protection. In our zip code 23523, we are literally surrounded by industry. And if it's not necessarily industry, it's the coal trains that come by. So we are absolutely surrounded by current industry like shipyards and manufacturing, also legacy pollution from abandoned petroleum tanks. I did want to offer a suggestion about what to measure. I think on your list you had mentioned particulate matter 2.5, that fine particulate matter. My understanding is that coal dust is much bigger, and so the air monitor that only measures 2.5 will miss the coal dust. I also would like you to use the EPA's definition of cumulative impacts, which is the totality of exposures to combinations of chemical and non-chemical stressors and their effects on health, well-being, and quality of life outcomes. The guidance should establish a clear, transparent, and enforceable process for evaluating cumulative impacts for both new and renewal permits. The guidance should apply to the permitting of any facility likely to harm an overly burdened community, not merely to certain categories of facilities, and not just projects of concern. The DEQ should assess impacts using a defined geographical area, like the census blocks that you use for the EJ screen, and combine that with other indicators of demographic and health data. The EJ focus communities, I found that interesting, and I would like to learn more about your interpretation of it, but I wondered if it could be similar to what's currently in Virginia code as fence line communities. Just a suggestion to look into that. The assessment, going back to the EJ assessment, should account for existing pollution sources, hazardous sites, traffic, air and water quality, health, climate stressors, and just also engaging with communities. Before submitting an application, applicants should prepare for the DEQ a public participation plan that includes multilingual notices, mailed outreach for nearby residents, public meetings at accessible times and locations, and opportunities for both oral and written comments. Also, all public comments should be considered regardless of duplication or technical expertise. I've been doing environmental justice work for a little over 10 years now, and a lot of this stuff goes over my head. So I can't expect my neighbor across the street who just celebrated, I think, her 86th birthday. She's going to kill me if she knows I'm telling her business. But I can't expect her to know what particulate matter 2.5 is. So I wish you would consider the non-technical expertise. Like Ms. Camplin said, you know, people who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution, and we shouldn't disregard their comments on a technicality. When a cumulative impact assessment shows that a community is already overburdened, permittees should be required to propose a mitigation plan with measures to minimize the harm from the permitted activity to the greatest extent possible. I'm thinking Cadillac and not Chevette, okay? If harm cannot be adequately avoided or mitigated, the DEQ should retain the authority to deny the permit. And one last thing, I was a little disappointed to hear some speakers last week suggest that cumulative impact should not be considered at all in permitting decisions. That perspective may protect the status quo and big business pocketbooks, but it does not protect the health of Virginians. Permits are permission slips to pollute, not bureaucratic boxes to be checked. The cumulative impact stressors cannot be exchanged with the promises of jobs or what we call in church 30 pieces of silver. Until being a good neighbor is profitable, the DEQ needs to protect vulnerable communities like mine that need this protection. And I thank you for your time.
Rob can work on that to make sure that that's functioning properly.
Thank you. I did just notice that the camera had gotten turned off. I turned it back on. Was that the issue? The camera? Okay.
I think it's an internet access.
Bear with us, please, for just a minute. We need to make sure that the live stream is working.
While you're waiting, there are snacks in the back of the room.
Please do help yourself.
Eat all those tomorrow, so please help yourself.
All right. Our colleague online has told us that we are good to go now, and we are ready for speaker number 9.
All right, thank y'all for having this town hall. It's very important for our voices to be heard. I'm Jay Boone. I am also a proud Berkeley resident. I'm representing myself as well as CUSP, which is an organization dealing with urban agriculture and sustainability, and the Norfolk Food Policy Council, which is a collective of residents in Norfolk building a food sovereign community. So again, with what has been said about Berkeley is completely accurate. I think one of the biggest things that's left out of the conversation is that we are a historical community. And I think outside of just meeting the markers that you guys are saying are very important, I think when I look at historical communities around Virginia and Norfolk and otherwise, there's a precedent that's set about what is and what isn't allowed in these areas, but for some reason in our community, there are no guidelines on that. It actually is a free for all. The fact that we have the amount of industry in our community, we have no access to our waterways in any way. Is a big turning point of why we're in the situation that we're in right now. When we came to some of the things that were said, obviously are definitely need to be considered as well. Some of the things that I'm seeing is the engagement. In the last year, specifically, one of the big dogs in the industry that are in the community, one of the things that was said when they did engagement is that they engaged with one group in particular. And that one group did not engage with the community as was promised. And so when it really things were coming through the pipeline, no one knew anything. And so I think that's something that has to be looked at is like when you're talking about engagement, what does that actually mean? It can't just be, oh, I went to this one group, I did this one thing, I checked this box. It has to be a holistic plan for that engagement. It also has to include reaching out, especially when we're talking about areas like our area. Yes, we are a predominantly African American community, but we're working class. And so especially if you're talking about maybe lower income, no income areas or any of those areas in between, people work, you know what I mean? So when you're doing engagement at certain times of day, or say, oh, I knocked on a door, what does that mean? If no one was home to answer you, if no one was there to go to your community meeting, like if you're not really truly engaging and actually hearing what people are saying, then you're not doing that. You're just saying you did and checking the box, right? Just much like this meeting. Yes, there's people here, but if there was no one here, would you still consider this in a meeting that you can say that you accomplished your goal, right? And so that's a lot that has been being done in the community. But one of the things as well, outside of just the things that you guys are looking at, which is the air, I know I saw water and land. I think one of the things was sound as well that needs to be added in, as well as light. We have a big issue with light all times of night. Our community doesn't get dark at all. We can't really see the stars. And so that's one of those things that I think when we think about stressors on communities, not getting enough sleep is one of those things. The Norfolk Food Policy Council, when we did our data, and we were looking at not only food deserts and what the issues were with food insecurity in communities, we're also mixing with the health, chronic health elements. Even if a community has access to a grocery store, some type of access, even if it's a pantry of some sort, if people are getting food, but their environment is not hospitable, ultimately they're still going to have those health and chronic ailments. And so looking at that, that's why the environment is so important, as well as the fact of growing food. When we're trying to get people sustainable and be able to grow their own food, and I'm talking to my neighbors and they're saying our cucumbers taste funny because of the runoff from the industry that's in our community, that's a problem. So you're not only messing with someone's their community livelihood, right? I should be able to go outside of my house. I should be able to open my door or open my window when I sleep and not have a nosebleed when I wake up. I should be able to, walk my kids and not worry about them having asthma or any of those things. All of those things are pertinent, but especially when you're also taking away someone's ability to sustain themselves. With the most important vital resource we have, which is food, and every human in this community and every person in this room has to eat. And so if I want to grow my own food, I should be able to do that in my yard if I have access to that. And I can't do it because the industry, no matter how much money they're making, no matter how many jobs they're creating, I cannot then support myself, my family, and just live, right? And so I think that's a big problem. As well as one of the other things, and I don't know how you would account for this, but motion, I don't know if that's a thing, but our houses shake. Because of the things that they're doing in these industries, we're constantly rattling. I can't hang my mugs. I was trying to, Pinterest up my kitchen, and I couldn't hang my mugs because every time I did it, they were shattering next to each other because of the shaking that's going on in our houses. So I think that's something that also has to be taken into account in whatever, however way that you can do that, legalese that you guys want to do it in. But I think going back to the fact that we're historical, it's great that you're going to have measures for these communities. I think when it comes to those communities that are high seniors, have high children in them, like, and also are historical, there needs to not just be these guidelines, but also best practices. Because not only is it that these areas are impacted by the EJ standards, but they have an extra element or extra value, quote unquote, if that makes sense. And if we're always going to talk about seniors and children when it comes to anything else and how they're susceptible to stuff, this is even more reason why they would be susceptible. And so they have to take higher measures to make sure that you're protecting them and not putting them at risk in that regard. And again, in a historical area, it has to mean something. To just be historical, just to say you're historical means I don't understand that. So if there was some type of guidelines outside of that, I think that's really important to do. I think one of the things was mentioned about the removal of things. So like, when people are coming in with the industry, they might remove trees that actually helped with air quality. They might have removed trees that also help with sound quality, right? Those things have to be looked at. When it comes to the traffic and industry. So we have industry, that's great, it's jobs. But again, when you look at the economics of the community, I think someone said that, I think about the shipyards. So the shipyards have thousands of people coming in. We only have maybe 3 places in our community to eat, right? So whether they're coming into work or going home and then going out to lunch, our traffic, our streets are just bombarded with speeding. We're seeing people trash our communities. We're seeing just people just ransacking the community overall. So even if that project or whoever is meeting your standards by the community standards, they're not, because they're impacting us in a negative way in regards that still is environmental, right? So I think that's something that also should be considered, and I don't know how to do that with you guys, but I would love to see how we can kind of work together to create that verbiage. But I think that's something, because again, if we're talking about the environment and you have people that are allowing the people that work in their properties to then also trash the outside of the community as well as the inside, I think that also plays a part, just because they're not necessarily doing it in your way. I think that's a land problem, right? They're infecting the land in some way. And I know for us, when it comes down to our like community gardens and stuff, all of that has a leadway. When Parks and Rec goes and mows over a lawn, all of those particulates, all of those plastics get chopped up and pushed out either into our garden beds, into our streets, which then when it rains, it goes into our Pescara waterways, it goes into the rivers, and all the in between. So we're trying to mitigate all of those things while also trying to mitigate the things that are coming outside of their fence line. So sandblasting, sound, shaking, and all those things in between. So I just think if we can look at not just, again, the guidelines that you're setting, but also making sure that we're setting a bar that is outside of the baseline, but also a bar for those to protect those communities that are even more susceptible to, more damage and harm. I think that's really important. And again, just to harbor, to go back on some of the sentiment, like in engaging with DEQ, this last round was the first time that I really had a lot of engagement with the agency, and I was very just overwhelmed and underwhelmed with the process, because of the fact that like we hit the marks, we did what we were told to do, and ultimately we were just told it's not good enough. And I said, I think that even if outside of everything, outside of you guys passing this, I think, again, putting some respect on your name, and acting as though like you guys are a force in the environmental space, and being able to say like, no, we're going to stand firm with the communities that are saying that they have these issues, or whatever the case may be. Even if you can't pick sides, I get that, but to make sure that we're able to have an opportunity to come to the table with these project leaders, to be able to voice any concerns. Because again, up until the point of maybe last year, maybe this year, none of that stuff was happening, even though it was being said that it was. You know what I mean? So I think I would love to see that as an agency that is putting themselves out there to engage and do these things, that you're actually setting the precedent and going forward, that this is what we're going to stand for as far as what it means in the environmental space. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are ready for speaker number 10.
Hello, everybody. I just made a note that about 10%, well, 20% of us, I think, are people of color, which I think is ironic considering if we thought there would be a concentration of people of color, this would be the place. So I just wanted to point out how hard it is to get people of color to come, and especially with low-income people. My name is Michelle Sorensen. I'm a retired nurse attorney, and I ended up doing COVID response for the last 3 years of the COVID crisis. When I retired, I decided to do advocacy, and I'm also a professor at Washington University. I'm from a retired military family. I live in Virginia Beach for 25 years, over which time our income, the houses have tripled in value, and we have a lot of retired people. And actually, on the map, it's red. It's considered low income in the neck there, which I think is amazing at the base of Lesnar Bridge. That I think points to the weakness of your map. I don't think it's specific enough. And I think people can use that to say this is overbroad and therefore discount the screen, if that makes sense. Let's see, what was I going to say? I live actually very near a Superfund site. Our marina used to have a gas station at the end of it, so we can't farm our own oysters, and we're trying to develop a wetland that's been problematic too. So even in areas like that that aren't necessarily low income, what we think of low income neighborhoods. I do agree that we have to make more accessible these get-togethers to people with low income. Often they have 2 jobs, they're elderly, they're handicapped, a single head of household, and unfortunately are enlisted. As you know, about 25% of our enlisted are considered low income as well. Let's see, I talked about that one too broad. Okay. One of the things I wanted to do was to read the definition of environmental justice. And they describe it not in terms of what's being done to people, but their experience of what's being done. Measuring whether victims feel heard, treated with respect, given a voice or explanation during legal or institutional processes, evaluating the extent to which physical, emotional, economic injuries are repaired. Again, the victim perspective, a psychological trait, measuring an individual's personal readiness to spot and react to unfairness directed at themselves, and tracking a victim's trust in the system based on promptness, transparent communication, and avoidance of victim blaming. I wanted to look at your timing for the deadlines for the DEQ. And apparently, we're supposed to have 2 of these public town halls before July 31st. The other one was in Richmond. That seems like a very large area. And a very short response period. The other thing is on October 31st, DEQ is to respond to the public comments, but from October 31st through December 31st is pretty much the holidays. And what I found working with my civic organizations is things come to a halt and they don't work very well. So it seems like an inconvenient time, and it seems like a short time frame, just from a practical standpoint. I also want to talk about environmental stresses. We've been talking about permits and things being done to people, but I think there are a lot of places that are environmentally fragile already, so they're already vulnerable. We don't even have to look at what's going to be done to them, but we have to look at their current situation. I think somebody else in the audience mentioned that already. And I think that is all I have. Yes, comprehensive plan. I sat in on task force for a comprehensive plan and mentioned both health and also environmental issues. They eventually got dropped off the comprehensive plan. I do think there's something in the legislation, though, that's requiring that the comprehensive plan include risk factors, health issues. And I don't know what we could do about that, but I do think that there was a bill that talked about some elements of comprehensive plan that should incorporate what we're talking about today. And I thank everybody for their patience and their attendance. I thank all of you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is number 11.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Melvin Moore. I'm representing Pewsville Civic League, Vice President. It's a community in Suffolk. And I didn't plan on speaking, but I just want to say thank everyone for coming out. Whether you are black, white, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. You're here because of any particular reason, whether it's personal, community, or business. Thank you for coming out. I think it doesn't matter demographically, percentages or not. It's just coming together for a common purpose or goal. So that's why I didn't have anything to say, but I felt compelled to say that. So appreciate Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. You guys at DQ do a great job. Continue to do your good work as we will continue to support you in what you're doing in any partnerships that we can have and moving forward. We're open to all that and working together. So thank you guys.
The next speaker is speaker 12.
Oh, I'm fine. My name is Margaret Moore. I'm an environmental scientist. I do work with environmental justice data frequently. Regards to the cumulative impact assessment definition and assessments in general, prior to 2025, the Council on Environmental Quality had an excellent definition of cumulative impact assessment. It was enacted through the EPA. Those were the NEPA standards. So those definitions, all of that guidance, it was in 40 CFR 1500 prior to 2025. That has since changed in the last 18 months. So those federal agencies that abided by those regulations and guidance had excellent cumulative impact assessment documents, handbooks on environmental justice. That's all been there in the past. So those definitions are encompassing of watershed as well as social and economic. I thank you very much for the Virginia EJ screen. Please continue to update the census data because, as we all know, our Commonwealth changes drastically from year to year. So if you could continue to update that census information. The other thing I would request is, as you put out this guidance, if you could put guidance out about if an agency or another entity is putting out, is seeking permits at the federal level where environmental justice is not being considered anymore, and environmental justice can't be mentioned in those permits. How are we supposed to turn a permit to you if we can't mention it? Do you see what I'm saying? If the environment, those words can't be used, how are we supposed to submit those? Other state agencies have come up with solutions to that, and that's really all I have.
Very much. Speaker 13.
Okay. Evening. My name is Gary Harris. I'm Managing Director for the Center for Sustainable Communities. We're about making communities greener, cleaner, healthier, safer, and more climate resilient through equity and environmental justice. I'm also Director of the National Environmental Justice Institute, which we're forming in Atlanta, Georgia. And about 5 years ago, I decided to go back to school and get another graduate degree, which focused on energy and environmental management and such. And so I had to write a paper 5 years ago in order to exit that program. And I don't know if it was insight or I just needed something to do, but I focused on designing an effective methodology to assess cumulative impacts on underserved communities, including transportation emissions from multiple sources. Turns out it was an 80-page paper and such. It went through both establishing a quantitative methodology as well as a qualitative approach, which in part focused on air permitting and such. So, which is our topic tonight. And in that paper, I called cumulative impacts the holy grail of environmental justice. You know, underserved communities face stressors in the form of multiple sources of pollution and existing challenges that significantly degrade health and well-being. Moreover, the sum total of these impacts can lead to premature death and increased hospitalizations. These cumulative impacts are even more detrimental when coupled with localized planning and development changes that do not properly assess impacts on adjacent or nearby communities. Although cumulative impacts are important, the development methodologies to assess and evaluate these impacts, like what we're trying to do now, have not been fully designed or deployed. Further, these methodologies may use data sources that are dated or aged and are not reliable. Therefore, projects like this works to provide three outcomes: deliberate and intentional outreach and education and awareness building about cumulative impacts to residents of underserved communities, the development of new and refined qualitative cumulative impacts methodologies useful for a broad number of stakeholders, and development of a comprehensive plan to deploy network of sensors to collect real-time air pollution data to inform the community about cumulative impacts with methodologies. And then lastly here, the project will initiate dialogue on measures and methods to quantify cumulative impacts through creation of an index. Looks like the same thing you guys are doing, an index using health data and also analytical tools. Combined actions should produce a set of tools that can be used by a host of stakeholders, including planning, zoning, and development officials, local and state agencies, and even businesses involved in projects that may impact communities. Again, the cumulative impact is what I call it the holy grail of environmental justice. The EPA Office of Research and Development defines cumulative impacts as a total burden, positive, neutral, negative, from chemical and non-chemical stressors and their interactions that affect health and well-being and the quality of life of an individual, community, or population at a given point in time or over a period of time. At the same time, cumulative impacts have significant links to environmental justice. Let me skip here. Run out of time here. So why is integrating the cumulative impacts methodology so important in the permitting process? The purpose of the permitting process is to prevent harm to the public during normal facility operation. Thus, the process serves as a barrier to ensure emissions are both understood and controlled. Therefore, mitigating impacts of pollution at the source serves as a prime activity related to reducing the effects of cumulative impacts. So what does this methodology look like? Step one, the cumulative impact assessment process for air permits would include the following steps. One, conduct a pre-application community notice, i.e. engagement. Two, perform qualitative screening phase one assessment. I'll go into this a little bit deeper later. Assess existing community conditions, environmental, health, socioeconomic, climate, and regional indicators. 4, assess cumulative impacts of existing and added air pollution from project. 5, assess cumulative impacts on communities from project. 6, hold a community meeting to discuss. 7, file a permit. 8, public notice and review and permit decisions and hold public comment, etc. So what are the entry conditions for this process? And I'll be quick. The CIA process will require for any new facility in or near EJ facility population within 1 mile for a non-major project and 5 miles for a major new facility or development. Or if the community may request this sort of analysis. When is an EJ cumulative impact analysis for a non-major required within 1 mile? 1, the process non-combustion emissions are greater than or equal to 10 tons per year. These are entry conditions into the analysis process. 2, combustion units that must meet fuel inputs thresholds greater than 40 million metric tons BTU per hour, natural gas boiler, or if I'm trying to cite a waste incinerator, or non-emergency engines, which run about 100 hours per year, additional peaker projects, transportation, volume increases in ship or port operations. Am I getting out of time here? Okay, I'll be quick. Next, for major cumulative impact assessments, within 5 miles. Okay, first was 1 mile, then next is 5 miles. If I'm adding processed 50 tons of nitric oxide or volatile organic compounds, okay, 50 tons. 2, 100 tons of any other criteria pollutant. 3, 25 tons combined hazardous air pollutions. 4 tons individual hazardous air pollutants. 5, large development, visible impacts on low-income communities. 6, no local air monitoring in place. 7, addition of peaker projects, and transportation traffic volume increases, and then increase of ship and port operations related to black carbon sources. I'm out of time.
Mr. Harris, you're not out of time, but would you be willing to share your paper with us? We're not the greatest. You have a lot of
all 77 pages, I promise.
I thought it was 80.
Well, I dropped 3 on the way. Quickly here, just 2 minutes. The steps for conducting an EJ/CIA process for proposed air permits are fully described below. 1, pre-application community notice and stakeholder engagement to inform the CIA and permit application. 2, perform a qualitative EJ screening assessment, early assessment and informed process for determination. 3, comprehensive assessment of existing community conditions using environmental health and social, economic, and climate and regional geographic indicators. 4, expand the number of air toxics evaluated, approximately double the current number of air toxics and additional discretion. 5, increase the cumulative air toxics air dispersion modeling that includes emissions from nearby permanent sources. 6, cumulative risk assessments of existing and new toxics to quantify and evaluate risk to health. 7, hold a meeting with the community. 8, detailed dispersion modeling, etc. I'll stop there. But yeah, I'll pass on
to reading it. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for your suggestion. The next speaker is number 14.
Hi, my name is Jeff Staples. I am director of a local nonprofit environmental organization named Save the Dismal. And also I serve on the Chesapeake Environmental Approval Council, which is a city board. So I wanted to go over some of the origins that relate to cumulative impact assessment. In this area here, especially along the Elizabeth River that I know of, we've had 200 years at least of pollution coming out. It all started with creosote, the stuff that covered railroad ties and things like that. That's been dumped in these waters for hundreds of years. And then we had on the Elizabeth River, we also had a coal plant there. Coal ash we found from a lawsuit that I was involved in with Dominion, that they had actually even dumped coal ash into the river itself, let alone the ponds. And then another thing that's not widely known is the coal ash was also, especially in minority neighborhoods, were spread along the right of ways of the electrical lines. Just terrible things like this. And of course, the coal dust coming off the trains in Norfolk has been, since I was a kid, some people have to sweep their porches twice a day. And the antiquated coal hopper dumper is still grandfathered in as being used. It's not covered at all where most of them are. So we need your help. The federal government is trying to stop rules on coal ash. NEPA is a thing of the past. And our local governments are also sometimes tied in with the industries that are trying to get into these places and put more harm on these neighborhoods. One example is data centers are only required to be 100 feet from the neighboring property boundary. In some neighborhoods like Pughesville and Ever Gardens are constantly put upon. Local government, when a data center came to one neighborhood, they allowed 60 some odd speakers to speak, no questions, and they denied the project. The next thing was a compressor station that would be put over by Eva Gardens, which is a largely minority neighborhood. And then there's several low-income neighborhoods close by. City Council changed the rules that night and said you only could speak 1 hour on each subject. We had 72 speakers that wanted to defend their neighborhood that could not be heard. So we need some help from the state. And then we have the enforcement of these neighborhood survey comments. Again, I'm going to go back to that air compressor station at Eva Gardens, which is also known as the Gidley compressor. The social media posts that the gas company put out, they were all employees of the company that were praising it. So we really need to verify these things. People that lived in the neighborhood, when we would go behind and canvass the neighborhoods, would tell us, no, we haven't seen anybody. We didn't know anything about this. So there's got to be a way that we can verify that they're notifying people. That's their job, but somehow they're getting away with not doing it. And I've heard this on tens of projects at least. So also, I think it would be helpful if you could find a way to share information with the State Corporation Commission, as they also have many of the same permits. They have to approve many of the same permits and projects that you folks do as well. It's from attending a hearing with them, it was amazing what they had not heard. And so I would hope that you two agencies could work together because we really need your help. And thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Speaker number 15.
Excuse me. Thank you.
It's okay. If someone has stepped out, we will circle back to them. Let's go ahead and do speaker number 16.
Gratitude for the opportunity this evening. My name is Delegate Jackie Hopeglass. I represent the 93rd District of the House of Delegates, which is portions of Norfolk. I just sort of want to maybe level set a bit and then maybe give some of the, just based off of, learning and studying some of the, you all asked about specific states and things that have done that you think are a good suggestion. My hope is that we get a process where there's screening, there's studying, there's reducing, and then there's deciding. What I mean by that is, that you all are screening to ID the concern, then studying that cumulative burden, which obviously needs to be defined very clearly by the General Assembly, reduce the preventable harm, and then make a sort of a very transparent permit decision. when looking at what other states have done and are doing, I think what New Jersey has done with sort of with enforceable permitting structure, that structure is very sound in a way. What we're hearing consistently is where are the teeth, and I think New Jersey's done a pretty good job at that. California does really well with establishing what a burden is and what a vulnerability is, right? And then sort of mapping that out and determining, across whether it's environment, it's health, or if it's socioeconomic categories. What Minnesota does on those meeting requirements, what I heard here is like, why would you want to meet afterwards? Well, why would we even do that? Well, we were talking about reviewing and analyzing and any omissions. And in their process, those comments have some legal standing in the work that they do. I think that would be really important. There was a mention made of, of philanthropy being a part of the assessment of, or how it is very interesting to have organizations or business say that I gave this much money to the community so I can pollute. I should get points for it. I don't think philanthropy, how much they give to a civically or organization, like you do that for the goodness of your heart, not to get score points. Okay, so what I'm hoping for the DEQ. And then I want to also level set of like, there's some responsibilities here. I hear people saying things that the General Assembly has to do. Like there are responsibilities and they're yours. I'm hoping that what we come to is where you all are screening broadly, but requiring full studies selectively, right? Being able to sort of sweep the floor. And when there's something big and you're like, that's glass, we need to pick that up. Build sort of a Virginia cumulative burden layer into that EJ assessment plus, like, is there a way to sort of trigger an examination and not just some sort of automatic verdict as it pertains to cumulative impact? Third, I think there's a level, well, I believe that consideration of geography that matches the harm, not just like arbitrary measuring 1 mile out or 1 mile radius, 2 mile radius, but sort of but measuring how the harm travels, right? Not just that distance from a property line. Fourth, this is what you all are doing, engaging before a decision is made. Like before you say, this is what we're doing, that's said after, I think, engagement that is already, I think, a part of some of the things that you all do, but continuing that. And whatever it is that comes out of these community meetings, ensuring that they also give responsible businesses some certainty. I would say, and I will underscore responsible certainty. It's also important in these meetings that I love to see people bark, but making sure that they bark up the right tree. So if I may, it is going to be the General Assembly's responsibility to define some of these things, whether it's cumulative impact, disproportionate burdens. What does that even mean? When and what those things happen? And those are trees that people can bark up now to their legislators. It is going to be our responsibility to fund the work honestly, right? It's a beautiful thing to have these community meetings, but I think what I know is if we don't have the money behind getting the work done, then we get a substandard job. And that's not by any means, we have enough human capital sitting right in front of us to do the job, but giving the bandwidth and the things that resources needs. Those are things that people can advocate to their legislators and folks now. There is a dire need for a connection with the local sightings and sort of the state environmental review. I think you may have heard this, at least I sat here and heard it 1 or 2 times about the locality choosing another way, right? And that inadvertently reflects poorly upon us as the state as well, because it trickles up. And so some ways, whatever that looks like, or even if it's a recommendation to us as the General Assembly in a way of like, if you want the municipalities or the county, cities and towns to be in a place where it's not misconstrued between what you all are doing and what they are doing, then how do we help? How are we of service to that? And lastly, I would say require some public reporting require public reporting. That would be what we would need to do in a set review time. So every 2 years, are we reviewing this? Are we looking at this? And I'm saying that out loud here, not for you all, but for the folks to know that there is another tree to simultaneously bark up as we sort of do this in tandem. And this is the absolute opportune time as legislators are building their agendas. If we wait until November, you're kind of late because we're preparing for session in January. And I believe, yeah, that's it. Gratitude.
Speaker number 17. Speaker 17. We'll come back to speaker 15. All right. Speaker 18. Are we at 18? I don't know how many numbers we have. Okay. So it sounded like we had 17 who had taken speaker slips. If anyone else at this point would like to speak, if you want to grab a speaker slip from the back, you are welcome to do that. We still have some time and we would love to hear from you.
May I ask a question while he's doing that? I just had like a day or two's notice. How can I get on your listserv so that I can find out about this? Thank you.
As we wrap things up, we will have a slide that has a QR code where you can sign up for our email.
Thank you.
To piggyback off of that, when we signed in, there was something on the sign-in sheet. Isn't that adequate? Or are we double dipping now?
Yes, if you
Okay.
if you check that box, we will add you.
Perfect, thank you.
Good evening. I'll try my best to follow up the delegate. But my name is Quinn Heinrich. I'm a city planner representing the city of Hampton. And the main things that I was thinking about hearing all the people who have spoken, and they've made very good points about how environmental justice affects communities and how DEQ should take those things into account. But a few of the things that I think should be stressed. First off, none of these issues end at the lines of localities and jurisdictions. I think the 5-mile radius idea that some people, or that has been put forward, is a really good one, because sometimes there are factories or manufacturing plants, data centers, any of those things that have impacts that are very local, but then also would transfer onto jurisdictional lines. As an example, in Hampton, there's our coal plants, or like the harbor in Newport News. There's a lot of coal ash that goes across through Newport News into the southwestern portion of Hampton and has air quality impacts there as well. Secondly, we hear a lot about the importance of environmental justice, but in a lot of localities, we also hear about the importance of building more housing, transportation, a lot of other things. And that's not to say that we absolutely should be taking environmental justice concerns into account, but these permitting processes should not be used as a way to stall projects that are of critical importance to some of those underserved communities, such as improving public transportation, expanding affordable housing, any of those things. I'm not saying that it is, but we just need to make sure that those things are taken into account. And in terms of outreach, we need to make sure that we conduct as much outreach as possible to hit as many people as possible, because as many people have said here, underserved communities often are not, or under-resourced communities often do not show up to these meetings. They often are not there at the right times. And so it's really important that we conduct a lot of outreach. I'd also strongly encourage you to conduct outreach to youth in all the regions there, especially on climate and environmental issues. Youth are particularly passionate about this. I count myself as a youth in this case. We are the people who will be feeling the impacts of climate change the longest. And so justifiably, we are the most concerned, and our voices should be heard in this process. So yeah, thank you for all of what you're doing, and I look forward to working on this as in my capacity at Hampton and as a person myself. So
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Speaker Amy.
Hi. First, I have two hats to wear in this meeting. One is I've been a nurse practitioner, family nurse practitioner for Virginia for 20 years, and I worked under Norm Oliver, who was our health commissioner, and this was a big passion of his because people come into our clinic and they tell us the risk factors of things like smoking or living in a house with lead paint, but we don't know where they live in comparison to facilities. And that really hinders what we work them up for. So that's the one hat I wear, in that it is really important for people to have a say in what comes around them. The other hat I wear is a very different hat. I grew up in Suffolk, Virginia, and I grew up in a family that had a landfill before there was a Clean Water Act. And so I grew up in that and went into healthcare world. Well, my parents passed and I ended up getting tagged in for this landfill. So I am running it and I have firsthand knowledge of what the regulations are for all these permits because I am the compliance officer for our facility. And it's been really eye-opening as to what the DEQ does. And I don't think that people really know many of these permits, what is behind them. We get visits that are random. We get visits that are scheduled. I look at stormwater reports. I look at groundwater reports. I know exactly what's leaving my site, how much dirt is in the stormwater. I had no idea that this was part of it as a kid, and I have to take a lot of continuing education and such. With that, I do know that when we go for permit expansions, it's very important for the community to have a say. You can't even consider a permit expansion with DEQ until you've gotten community involvement. So some of these things are already in place, and so some of these rules could be tagged onto. So it's really helpful when you're citing a new landfill, which we don't need to do. Ours has been there since the 70s, and it's way back in the woods, and you can't see any neighbors, which is awesome. And we have great buffer land around it. However, when we expand, because all landfills fill, you need to know who you're impacting. And so I think that this, as a business owner and a healthcare worker, was really helpful for me to hear what is important to community, because unless the business owners and the people looking for these permits are coming to these meetings, they're not hearing this, and they're hiring people to go and do community outreach, and that is very ineffective. If you're just hiring someone to go do your community outreach and they're not the people that need to uphold the standards that you're being asked to uphold for the community, it's just one box to check. And so I wear two hats here because it's really important for me to protect the health and the happiness of vulnerable populations in Virginia. It's also important for me to know the rules and know how to reach out to the community. And so I personally welcome anyone's advice as a business owner that has these permits as to who we should be reaching out to, because sometimes we just don't know how to do that. And unfortunately, knocking on people's doors these days is not usually well received. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll do another call for speaker number 15. And is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? I'm putting on my teacher hat and waiting a good 10 seconds.
I thought I spoke all right. I just want, if there's a way I can add something, I can write it in if I have to.
We have time.
Okay, it's nothing, so can I just say it or I gotta?
I think you should come to the microphone.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. I'm sorry, y'all. Speaker number. Okay.
Jay, what was your speaker number?
Oh.
Were you
She was
nine?
number 9.
You're welcome.
I just want to make a note. I think it was said, but one of the issues that we saw is that even though our sites around us were maybe cited or fined, they still were able to operate. And I think there needs to be a strong stop work order that is involved with any violations that happen, and as well as no grandfather clauses. Again, in our community alone, we have the vast majority of our city's industry, like shipyards in us. And so if there's a grandfather clause, that means we will get no protections in that. So if there's any way that we can also mitigate that, that would be very helpful for us. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak tonight? All right, we do have a slide or two to close. And of course, we will be remaining here until 9 p.m. All right. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your feedback and for your time. We appreciate all those suggestions. And as soon as tomorrow or maybe tonight, we'll start working on those suggestions and trying to figure out how to incorporate them in the concepts for the draft environmental justice guidance. There are some questions about how to receive our DEQ updates. And so here we have a QR code that will get you updates from DEQ and particularly on environmental justice issues. We have a web page and you can see it right there too. Again, the QR code should get you there where we are posting the information about the town halls and providing any other updates. And you did sign up, and if you check the box, you should be able to get those updates too. You're welcome to submit your suggestions to EG comments at dq.virginia.gov. This presentation will be posted on the website. On this webpage, we already have the similar presentation posted from the Richmond Town Hall, in addition to the fact sheet, so you can all find it on the website. And again, we are working to schedule a wholly virtual town hall for hopefully for next week. So you'll get an update on that, and you're all welcome to attend and provide all your suggestions. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time. And again, we'll be here until 9. Thank you.
Thanks. They were. That's the beauty of it.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
So that's not bad.
We're gonna go to 80-20.
Right. All the left. Yeah. All the. I don't know.